Alright, try to make this video. I've attempted to eliminate all sources of personalization so I don't have to see my face and I'm not bound by my apartment, indoors, and property and all that. And I'm looking to just talk about some things, and the thought process in doing that is not going very well, just because I've come to a point where I have just not wanted to listen to anybody, and I would encourage people listening to this just to not listen and think for yourselves. And it's just a shame that people still even have to deal with this platform. And I'd say mostly the people that are still making videos, at least whom I was following, they were sick, ill, mentally ill people, and they may seem interesting and kind-hearted, but they're just not, and I'm one of them. And I don't even think that I should be conversing with them. Equally, should I be listened to and dialogued in these certain ways, because we're essentially creating transmissions that are broadcasted by satellites and onto people's phones, and it makes for these fake conversations. So the only thing that really gets more centralized, or privatized rather, would be communication. So in a privatized communication setup, you are just you're inviting authoritarianism. And so when you have people who you think you're like-minded with, or they're older so they have more wisdom, you're not really going to get that. You're just going to get personalized broadcasts of other people, and they're going to lead people astray. So I would just advise people not to listen, and listen to yourselves, or make your own monologues with yourself and post them on YouTube. And if people listen to them, tell people to stop listening to them, because there's nothing special about talking to yourself. I've been doing it for 10 years, and it just never does anything for anyone, essentially. And it's definitely no work of accomplishment. I'd suppose that advocating for certain things, advocating for veganism, or advocating for sentiocentric anti-natalism, those are good things. Pro-mortalism, I'll just say. But in the long run, they just encourage groupthink, and groupthink is just never any good. I guess unless it's acclimated that you be able to think for yourself. So I'll just assume now that no one else is listening, and I'll just go on about what I wanted to talk about within sort of my limitless boundaries here, with no personalization. But privatization was brought up, and privatization, or the private sector being capitalist sector, the public sector would be organizations like trash or construction workers that help the public space, public servants like police officers or people who work in emergency rooms. Those are all public space operatives, and something like a private space operative would be your corporations. And it was brought up in light of making videos outside, so you were able to sort of embrace these privatized uses of government. And it is so very true that we have such a distinguished, renowned, privatized organizations that are always at our fingertips. And it seems like all of our produce and all of our well, I'll just say produce, food, especially those things, they're all in the category of privatization. So, continuing. I'm just not one to be rude and talk to people about these things. So, again, we're sort of at a hang-up with the misanthropy argument. And misanthropy can sort of be a misunderstanding of the misunderstanding of the anthropic principles. Anthropic principles being that these privatizations are supposed to somehow help, when yes, in reality, they could just be helping in the most basic ways, giving us authority over where we go to the bathroom and sewage and things like that. And so in that sense, do you want to be a misanthrope? Do you want to be against privatization if it's going to interfere? So this is where I sort of digress and come to terms that some people are just so far gone in their mental illness or drug addiction, alcoholism, what have you, that they simply cannot purge their concepts of reality enough to be able to stabilize their conduct in society. So they have to live homelessly without welfare, even though these welfare systems are set up. There is just, some people are just too far gone, and I don't really think that that's necessarily a way for the rich to purge the poor out of society, but I think it does in a way. And then you also have people inescapably having less and less children. The United States is down to 1.7. Last time I checked, it could have been last year or the year before. It was about 2.2, and that is a huge measure. That is a drastic percentile, 0.5%. And I think it's Niger or Somalia, they're up at like 6.0. They're down from like 6.5 to 6.0. And they're supposed to emphatically hit around 2.5 some point in this century with birth control and education, which would obviously be privatizations. So do you be misanthropic about those situations? Like, do you be misanthropic about veganism? So yeah, there's a number of things to be anthropic about, and most of the time, yes, they are actions that you don't necessarily have to take, or you don't necessarily have to go do drugs and party and all that. You can just try to learn and study and be vigilant in self-education, but again, you just shouldn't be listening to this if you're like not mentally ill. And then even if you are mentally ill, mentally ill people are just not good people to hang around or to have entertain you, in my personal opinion. If all you had was YouTube, I would say pick up a book and read books and try to recite your thoughts into monologues on the phone. If that's all you can do, I think it's a pretty good way to thinking out loud. But yeah, the people are just they're just no more good for me now than they ever were, and I've just come to a realization of it. But I have learned things. I don't necessarily think they were the reason I got a vasectomy or things like that. But so in a sense, I've really just wanted their company, since they were ill people themselves. But yeah, and then in the scope of science, if you're not interested in the science part, you should definitely stop listening to this now. But the science part has come around indefinitely, and so now there's the thought process that the Force has always sort of been adjunct to a wave, and the big hypocrisy is supposed to be that the Force cannot be a wave. The big hypocrisy would be that the Force cannot be a wave, that the Force is subservient to a wave particle duality that is non-adherent to each constituent in the universe. So each constituent in the universe can be divided, and it seems to be a word game, which I don't think it is. I don't think anything of games. I don't really think talking about vocabulary should or linguistics should have a sense of games. But the fact of the matter is that the reality is that the constituents in a wave function are going to act as imaginary infinitesimals, or function could act as foreshadowing to a background that is immense with, I guess, all kinds of force. So that's sort of the pry in intellect, is that it has just a bigger capacity to store more things. And so that's where atoms come into play, and people aren't going to be impressed by atoms or what they stand for, which I technically just don't agree with, because there is a lot to be said for the nature of reality that is intersecting in nature. So as vast as nature can be, the vast conceptualization of nature should insist upon being able to see that it can only stand symmetrically in infinite spaces. And that's sort of what I keep having to reiterate, but for good reason.